Illinois faces some big challenges. Today, we're about to hear a truly honest analysis of the problems we face. Equally as important, you'll also hear an in-depth discussion of some practical solutions. This is your radio source for stories, the insight, and the answers you won't hear anywhere else. Not in the media and not coming from Springfield. You're listening to Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute. Now, here's your host, AM 560's Dan Proft.
Good afternoon, Dan Proft, and with me on this edition of Illinois Rising is Ted Dabrowski. He's the Vice President of Policy at the Illinois Policy Institute, illinoispolicy.org. And Ted, this week, Leslie Munger, Illinois State Comptroller, had a press conference where she described in painstaking detail how damaging it is to state finances and her ability to pay bills that are owed to service providers to the state. Without having a state budget, a constitutionally balanced state budget in force. She tried to give the Chicago Press Corps a bit of a tutorial in math. Now, that is a daunting task for anyone, but she made a game effort. Here's a little bit of what Leslie Munger had to say in terms of trying to make people understand these stories where Illinois lottery winners are going to have their winnings delayed in terms of payout and why social service providers aren't getting paid as quickly as they would like, and so on and so forth. Comptroller Munger.
So when you put it all together, between the court orders, the consent decrees, the continuing appropriations, and other mechanisms that are being used to pay bills in our state despite a budget in place right now, we estimate that we are paying about 90% of bills that were covered under last year's budget. And so that all sounds like that should be good on the surface, doesn't it? But the problem is that Illinois does not have the money to back up what is being committed in these court orders, because these court orders are spending money based on fiscal 15 spending. In fact, revenues this year in fiscal 16 are expected to be down by almost 18%, or $2.4 billion just in the first half of this year alone. This is not a surprise that our revenues are lower, given that the temporary tax increase sunset back in January. But simple math tells you that with a revenue decline, you need to reduce your spending or change your spending patterns, and that simply has not happened as we have gone into this new fiscal year without a budget. So
we have a Democrat-controlled General Assembly that committed to $4 billion more than anticipated revenue, and we've got courts ordering the comptroller to cut checks where there is no revenue to back up the checks. How does this all work itself out, Ted Dabrowski?
Well, what we need to do is start grabbing onto some of the reforms that we need to make. Of course, I'm hitting the actual policy, not the politics, but we need the reforms to have Illinois grow again and grow our tax revenues. But until we start doing balanced budgets, we haven't had one since 2001. We're going to stay in this mess. We've had unpaid bills for nearly a decade now, and it's time to get that fixed by having the discipline we need.
And for more review of this, we're now joined by Mish Shedlock. You know Mish from Mish's Global Economic Trend Analysis. He's an investment representative for Sitka Pacific Capital Management. And Mish joins us now. Thanks for joining us, Mish. Appreciate it.
Hey, a pleasure to be back on the show.
So your assessment of what Leslie Munger had to say, Comptroller Munger, as well as just kind of the larger issue of Illinois' current financial struggles.
Well, there's nothing shocking about this. That's the thing. I mean, people are acting as if that article was a surprise. And I went back and looked on my blog, and I said, I've seen this number before. And sure enough, I wrote about an Illinois budget deficit of $9 billion, and that was back in May 4th. And I'm looking at on May 4th. And I'm looking at that post right now. I actually got the number from Cranes. So we saw this article here in Cranes saying that the deficit is now, over that, and that didn't even count the fact that Illinois couldn't afford to make a lottery payout. So it's now up to $10.5 billion. They're saying. And that's including half of $4 billion in other spending. I'm not even sure if that includes the lottery payment that they skipped.
Well, so here's the thing, too. I mean, and you're exactly right. This is Groundhog Day in Illinois. 4 years ago, when we passed the temporary income tax increase and corporate tax increase, we had about $8.5 billion in unpaid bills, just unpaid bills alone. Forget the out-of-balance budgets.
Right.
And after $30-some-odd billion in revenue during the course of the imposition of that tax increase, we come now to the other side 4 years later where we have $8.5 billion in unpaid bills by year end. So 4 years and $30 billion later, we're in the same place we were 4 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And it's actually worse because the city of Chicago wants $500 million from Ronner to bail out Chicago public schools. Well, that's not going to happen. They're still counting all of these things that you and I both know are not going to happen. The Nuveen did a study, and we've talked about this before, I believe, but they said that property taxes in Chicago need to go up by 50%, 50% just to bail out the school system. But it's not going to bail out the school system because as soon as they raise those taxes, the teachers' union and the school administration is going to use those money to pay for salaries. That's what they've done with every increase. Of all of the tax hikes, now remember they said where these tax hikes were going to go? Only something like 90% of them actually went to raise salaries. 10% of them went for what they were supposed to do, shore up pensions.
Amish, Dan mentioned very well that we had this $30 billion in additional money to supposedly fix the state, like you say, fix pensions, pay down the unpaid bills. That was one of the big reasons, and fix the economy. Well, as Dan said, 4 years later, all those things are headed in the wrong direction. So, I'd argue that the reason why, and I think you're saying the same thing, is that we just take the additional money and spend it, and instead of making reforms. So is it the fact that we're not making the reforms that keeps driving this?
Oh, absolutely. And also, it's the Democratic. It's the progressive. I don't know how they got that term. They always are arguing for tax hikes. The problem is these tax hikes are causing an exodus of people from taxpayers and businesses from the state of Illinois.
Yeah, but let me ask you both this question. Maybe that's a good thing as far as Democrats are concerned for political power, because what you have going on in Chicago and to a large extent in Illinois is the hollowing out, right? So you have very rich people who are perfectly happy to live in Manhattan or San Francisco or high-tax Chicago because they're insulated from terrible public policy. And you have people on the other end of the socioeconomic scale who are dependent on transfer payments and not a lot in the middle. But if you have the very wealthy people and people at the lower end, both insulated from terrible public policy and both center-left, progressive, then that ensures the political balance of power will remain the same, and that's really what they care about. So big deal.
Actually, the political balance of power is remaining the same.
Right.
But, what I said matters as well. I mean, it's clear. Illinois lost lost income population to nearly every state in the union. Alaska. Illinois lost to Alaska. So these people are voting with their feet, and they're taking bigger salaries with them that comes in. Yeah, so we do have a political hollowing out, but to suggest that's good is like suggesting that the hollowing out of Detroit was good. Well, it's not. At some point, there's a budget crisis, and I'm just hoping that Ronner sticks to what he says and says, look, no deal until we get structural reforms. This is the first time Illinois has had a governor that's been willing to stand up to Mike Madigan and just say no. Remember that campaign? What was that? Nancy, just say no. That's what Ronner needs to do. Just say no
to the drug of overspending. Yes,
to more spending or to any deal that does not include structural reforms.
So, Mitch, does this mean that we're just going to continue on the same path if Dan's political theory is right, and that this is just keeping the progressives in power and they can keep doing the same thing over and over? Does this just mean that we're waiting for that collapse to finally happen? And eventually moving towards a Detroit style, well, that's for Chicago, but of course a state that just can't function. And why isn't somebody like Moody's and others downgrading Illinois to junk bond status like they did Chicago?
Well, they have downgraded Chicago. I suspect when this details of this budget impasse comes out, we are going to see downgrades of the state itself. Will that get any action, though, from Madigan? I don't think so. Madigan has a business that is, where he does tax consulting for businesses and individuals and property tax reassessment that he benefits by the basis of the status quo. I mean, it's the height of political cronyism and corruption, what Madigan has done to the state. And, when people finally wake up and get rid of this guy, I don't know. But something needs to happen, and perhaps just Warner just saying no.
Well,
we'll get, Moody's and everyone else to wake up and point the finger at what the problem really is. It needs to be pointed straight at Madigan and the lack of reform.
Well, people like their banana republic. Mish Shedlock, who runs the blog Mish's Global Economic Trend Analysis and Investment Rep for Sitka Pacific Capital Management. Mish, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate your time.
A pleasure to be back on. Give me a buzz anytime.
Thank you.